Judicial Watch weekly update on social. Hey everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with our Judicial Watch weekly update on social media. Thank you as always for joining us. This week I'm at an undisclosed location giving you this special report on the current crisis, which is dramatically being addressed by the incoming President-elect Trump, the President-elect President Trump, with some astonishingly good cabinet picks. So I'll go through all of those with you and bring you up to date as to what you can do to help ensure we get good policy out of the new Congress and the new administration. Plus, we have new lawsuits over DEI at West Point, and the Biden gang, it looks like, I'm sure, is funding terrorism in Gaza, and I'll give you the details on that. So it's now been 2 weeks or so since Election Day. Outrageously, they're still counting votes and recounting votes in certain jurisdictions. I'll get into that in a minute. And it became official this week that the Republicans would retain, although by a narrow margin, the House of Representatives. So for the first time in a bit, you're going to have Republicans control the presidency again, the House, and the Senate. And Speaker Johnson is going to be the speaker again. So all the Republicans supported that. So I guess any dissent was, at least for now, suppressed as everyone seeks unity. And in the Senate, there was a big battle at the over who will be the Senate Majority Leader. The Senate Majority Leader is the leader of the majority of the senators who control the Senate. In this case, it's going to be the Republican. So he'll be essentially running the Senate. Because the way Senate Majority Leaders have previously run the Senate is they kind of run it as a little bit of a kind-hearted dictatorship, and I guess it's a charitable way of putting it. Conservatives have coalesced around Rick Scott, but Senator John Thune is now the Senate Majority Leader, and some folks don't like him because he's associated with the McConnell way. But we'll see what happens. Will he get these nominees by Trump through? Will he push forward the reforms and budget items of the new Trump administration? That's going to be the test for John Thune, and that's going to be the expectation given the mandate it looks like Republicans have and the conservatives have accordingly for significant reform and accountability and justice really here through either Congress or through the administration and its appointees. And of course, the other big news is the announcement, and President Trump is announcing it almost daily, the appointments of cabinet officials, sub-cabinet officials, and other agency heads in the last week or two. The biggest news is, or there's a lot of big news, but the headlines are Pete Hegseth, the veteran activist, former talk show host over on Fox News, and a veteran. He's been in the military for 20 years, and he's not just any veteran, he's a hero. He's gotten, I think he got what did he get? The Bronze Star twice. So he's a hero, and he's been a critic of the woke Pentagon, the destruction of the morale of our military, the contempt the brass there have for those that they're training by forcing them to go through woke indoctrination, the vaccine mandates, the contempt for the everyday fighting man and woman. And Pete is an excellent choice. I hope he gets a lot of great people around him at the Pentagon because the long knives will be out. And it's exciting. This is exactly the type of reformist cabinet official we need in order to make lasting change and to kind of address these crises that we're facing in a direct way, as opposed to, we'll just put in your typical Republican, conservative, patriotic folks, but who just have a very narrow view, a narrow conception, an unimaginative conception of work they need to do. And similarly, we had the appointment of Tulsi Gabbard to be head of the Office of National Intelligence, so a leading intelligence official. And Tulsi Gabbard, of course, a critic of the traditional intelligence establishment here in Washington, D.C., a former Democrat who recently became a Republican. I don't necessarily buy into all of her ideas, but I do know she's a patriot. Again, another great veteran. And I do know she understands the corruption of the intelligence community. And so, again, I call it a magical pick of Tulsi Gabbard. And as if those two picks weren't good enough, he followed up with the astonishing announcement of Matt Gaetz, the now former congressman, because he resigned immediately from Congress, from Florida, who has, from the moment I met him and from the moment I saw him as a leader in terms of battling against corruption and for transparency. He took on all of this corruption by the deep state and the Justice Department, FBI, et cetera, targeting Trump. He made life difficult for even Republican leaders because of his sometimes lonely and principled opposition to what they wanted to do. And I was on, so he's a great pick for the Justice Department. As I said, it's an inspired pick. And everyone says, well, these folks don't have experience. Experience what? Failing? Being caretakers of the swamp agencies? Making sure there's not too much done to hold them to account? That's the typical Republican approach. And President Trump was not elected to govern as the typical Republican. He was elected to save the country from the deep state machinations that are destroying our Republican form of government. It's not just about destroying him, it's about destroying all the institutions that protect all of us. And I talked about this a little bit with my friend Benny Johnson on the internet the other day. Let's play that clip.
Tom, you're a very humble man, and so I'm not going to even say that stuff with you on camera, all right? Because I know it'd make you blush. So.
I think you can go on a few minutes, actually.
Okay. Yes, I've long awaited your take on this pick. Now, we've asked multiple times on the program in months past, what should a Trump attorney general do? And so the table is set. It's yours, Tom. Your take on the Matt Gaetz selection.
I've always been asked, who should the attorney general should be? And I'd be like, I don't know. But I do know what attitude they need to have, right? And what approach they need to have. And no matter who it is, as long as they have the right approach, that's great. And so he had a lot of choices. And Gaetz fits into that mold of having the right approach, understanding, from my perspective, the dire threat to our constitutional republic from this compromised, conflicted, corrupted Justice Department that has spent not just the last 4 years, but I would argue the last almost 10 years trying to jail the regime's political opponent, the top political opponent, Donald Trump, through spying, sedition, conspiracy, smears, raids, gag orders. And as we see with the Secret Service fails, which in my view were purposeful, they literally were trying to get him killed, this regime. So someone like Matt Gaetz is the type of approach, he has the approach that's necessary to deal with this Justice Department. And all these senators, a vote for Matt Gaetz, that's just like the lowest possible bar for what's required. They need to not only support Matt Gaetz and whoever the Justice Department Attorney General is going to be from Trump, but also the reform effort. This Justice Department cannot continue in its current form. The FBI, I think, is irredeemably corrupt, and I don't think it can be saved. So we need the Congress to get on board not only with the appointments, but with supporting the rule of law and making sure these agencies are never able to do what they've done to this country ever again.
And I think Gaetz is a great pick. If I were him, I would immediately, basically, what do they call it in the military, where they kind of do these kind of system-wide stand downs, right? To make sure things are being done right for safety and other reasons. That's what he should do with the Justice Department. There should be like an immediate stand down for all of these left-wing activists, prosecutors, employees. Say, stop whatever you're doing. And before you do anything else, unless it's a matter of life or death, let's just take a pill here, take a chill pill until we get a handle as to what the heck's going on here in this agency. That's the least that the Gaetz should do, in my view. And of course, you have, and there's urgency because they haven't stopped abusing Trump. Right now, the Justice Department, Jack Smith, furiously writing reports designed to smear Trump because they can't prosecute him, or so they pretend. Now they're pretending that they can't prosecute him, showing how political it was to begin with. And Jack Smith, showing that how political things were to begin with, is planning to leave before Trump comes in. Well, if he was an apolitical prosecutor, why would he time his coming and going to the presidency, coming and going? What difference would it make if Trump comes in? Shouldn't it be held accountable? And doesn't he work for the president and the Justice Department, no matter who's president? These are political operations, and they're operating right this minute as political operations. So President Trump, the incoming president of the United States, is currently being abused by this Justice Department, this Attorney General, this FBI. And the big question is, who's going to run the FBI? Because the expectation is that either Wray will resign or that Trump will fire him. And I think there are obviously, I think there are other inspired choices he can make, like Matt Gaetz, that he can place over in the FBI. He can't, and I've said it once and I'll say it again, after 4 years, the Justice Department needs to be a very different agency. And I don't know if the FBI can be redeemed. I'm not convinced that the FBI can survive any honest effort of government reform. So there's a lot of work to be done. And, Matt Gaetz, he's been we've worked with Matt on significant issues, and, he's a big fan of Judicial Watch. And, I always appreciate his leadership. And there were 2 clips I posted up on the internet the other day that kind of shows why the deep state is aghast that Matt Gaetz might be the Attorney General of the United States. Let's run a tape where he is talking about the abusive censorship by the Biden gang of American citizens.
Mr. Flaherty, as you were putting the heat on social media companies, did you make the decisions which posts were most egregious to highlight or flag, or were there other people telling you which posts to go and express concern about?
Congressman, I'll say in general, we were lifting up examples of content that we felt were violating.
Right, when you say we, I just want to know which human beings were involved in deciding, like, this Leonardo DiCaprio meme had to go.
In general, we were discussing specific pieces of content when we were discussing.
Again, I know you guys love pronouns, but we is not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the names of the people.
Congressman, I'm not authorized to.
Well, you wrote an email on April 21st, 2021. We remain concerned that YouTube is funneling people into vaccine hesitancy. This concern is shared at the highest, and I mean highest, levels of the White House. So we'd like to continue a good faith dialogue here. I'm on the hook for reporting out. Who were you on the hook for reporting out to?
Congressman, I can't recall who specifically I was referencing in that document.
Because you kind of just strike me as a functionary. I don't really think you were making these decisions. I think that these people that you say the highest levels of the White, when you say the highest, and I mean the highest levels of the White House, Who are you referring to? Without using the word we.
Congressman, I can't.
I mean, you can see. I tell you, they're talking about how terrible these confirmation hearings are going to be for Gaetz. I think they're going to be terrible for the Senate. Gaetz is going to eat him alive. Look at his discussion with the special counsel at the time, who gave Biden a get out of jail free card because supposedly he has dementia.
February 8th, the White House question, Mr. President, why did you share classified information with your ghostwriter? The President, I did not share classified information. I did not share it. I guarantee I did not. That's not true, is it, Mr. Hur?
That is inconsistent with the findings based on the evidence in my report.
Yeah, so it's a lie, is just what regular people would say, right? Yeah, all right. So the next one. And all the stuff that was in my home was in filing cabinets that were either locked or able to be locked. That wasn't true either, was it?
That was inconsistent with the findings of our investigation.
Another lie, people might say, right? Because what you put in your report was among the places Mr. Biden's lawyers found classified documents in the garage was a damaged open box.
So you see, Gaetz is not going to need much hand-holding in any confirmation hearing. And I know there's noise about his conduct and who he had relations with. And all I know is that the worst Justice Department in American history, Garland's Justice Department, did their best to smear him and try to jail him. And they couldn't even charge him with any crimes related to that so-called misconduct down there. And now this ethics committee report out of the House, I want to give you some background. The ethics committee has been a tool of the Republican establishment for some time, and it's used to punish people like Gaetz, who are outsiders, who are reformers, and that's the reality of it. So the fact that this ethics committee has a nasty report about Gaetz is no different than the Washington Post having a nasty report about Matt Gaetz, and should be given the same weight and credibility. I mean, this same ethics committee has done jack on the corruption that was in their face on Adam Schiff, on Swalwell, on the radical congresswoman from where's she from? Minnesota, Ilhan Omar, and Matt Gaetz. They're planning to leak some crazed report to smear him. So what should be done? You need to call your senators. Do you think all these reformers should be confirmed? Do you think Pete Hegseth should be confirmed? Do you think Matt Gaetz should be confirmed, Tulsi, etc.? Call your senators and let them know what you think. 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121, and ask for your senators and let them know what you think. And also ask for the majority leader's office and let him know what you think. So you should call your individual senators, and you should call Senator Thune to let him know what you think about whether these individuals should be confirmed. I haven't seen anything to keep any of these people out of the positions to which President Trump has nominated them. I haven't. And given, I was talking to the New York Post the other day, and I pointed out, I said, given the loser people that have been running cabinet agencies for the last few decades, what a breath of fresh air these folks are. And I was at an event and someone called it like a war cabinet in terms of their potential impact. And when I was talking with Benny, I don't know if, was it in the clip? I don't remember if it was in the clip now. You know, I highlighted that, you know, we could spend an hour talking about how significant Hegseth's appointment is to the Pentagon. I mean, if I were him, I'd fire all the generals, practically speaking, at least the senior generals. Clean out the DEI. Stop the transgender extremist abuses. Stop killing babies with taxpayer defense funds. I don't care where you stand on abortion, but do you think defense funds should be used to kill unborn babies through abortion? I don't. And certainly the law doesn't allow for it. There's a lot to be done. That's why they don't want Hegseth, because he knows what's up. Same thing with Tulsi. The same thing with Gaetz. So I thank President Trump for these nominees. And it doesn't mean they're going to get a free pass from Judicial Watch, I tell you. We're going to demand answers. We're going to demand accountability. We're going to keep the press on through our FOIA litigation, through our other work. We just don't say, okay, well, there's a good appointee and that's the end of it. It's not the end of it, and it can't be the end of it for you. There's this moment in time, historic, that can be used to achieve significant benefit for the American public in terms of curtailing government corruption. You know, in the case of Gaetz, he needs to prosecute the prosecutors who abused power to target Trump and other innocent Americans. Jack Smith should be interviewing criminal defense lawyers in a sane Washington, D.C., under a Justice Department run by Gaetz. I tell you, I don't even know if Gaetz should run any investigation into the Justice Department, because I don't know if the Justice Department can investigate itself. Maybe President Trump, I think, should appoint a special counsel. Or if it's to be done, maybe Matt should just do the special counsel work himself and do the actual investigation personally and run it directly, because he's the only one I would trust over there. So some good stuff, you know, but we got to be serious here, right? And we can, if you're a Republican, you can celebrate. If you're conservative, you can celebrate. And certainly if you want good public policy, it might be easier if you're conservative, but you got to have high standards. The voters wanted the lawfare stopped. They want the deportations to continue or to begin. It's got to get done. It's got to get done. Tom Homan was nominated as border czar. I don't know what technically he's going to be doing, but obviously he'll be running things in that regard. Kristi Noem is going to be nominated as DHS secretary. Oh, and I forgot Bobby Kennedy, RFK Jr., nominated as HHS secretary. And what I love about it is I don't like all their views. You know, I joke, I don't even agree with me sometimes, right? But I do know they're reformers at heart, right? And so I think I've had fairly high expectations. And I expect them to meet those expectations in terms of taking on these deep state agencies. I mean, Fauci, there's got to be a criminal investigation of the gain of function research as it relates to Fauci. I mean, HHS is out of control. DHS is out of control. You know, DHS, Secret Service is under DHS. A lot of things need to be done. So if you want these good folks, I consider them to be good folks, but it doesn't matter what I think. It matters what you think, dear American voter. And you need to share your views with your members of Congress, specifically your senators in the case of confirmation. But remember, that's just the first vote. What's the second, third, fourth votes in terms of government reform? You know, the spending, which I think is out of control. I think it's a corruption issue. And the other big news, obviously, is the announcement of the Department of Government Efficiency to be run by Elon Musk. So Trump has set this up, and Vivek Ramaswamy. And they're going to try to find savings. It's not going to be hard to do. Now, there's questions about how it's going to work and, you know, how they can achieve the results they want to achieve. But you can be sure that Judicial Watch will do everything we can do under the law to help that agency or commission or whatever it is in the end. I don't even know what it's going to be in the end. Because I know, and you probably know instinctively, that with big government comes big corruption. And all of that is tied to big secrecy. So I think this Elon Musk program as much a government, an anti-government corruption operation as it is an anti-government waste fraud, waste operation, efficiency operation. Because the bigger the government, the bigger the corruption. Less government means less corruption. I mean, the reason that FOIA is so important is otherwise no one would know what the government's doing. Congress isn't doing it. They're doing it a little bit better because they've been following Judicial Watch's lead. But if it weren't for Judicial Watch's heavy lifting, we wouldn't know half of what government's been doing. Pretty much all the major scandals that you were concerned about, much of what we know about all of those scandals is a result of Judicial Watch's FOIA work. And my view is, as a conservative, well, the less work, the less interest we have in what they're doing, because it's either inconsequential or easily understood, because there's a public facing component and transparency about it. I mean, the fact that we have to use FOIA all the time is a symptom that our government is so secretive and out of control. Because a lot of this should be public. A lot of this we should know without having to ask. So I didn't mean to digress, and I guess I could talk forever about what it is we need to do in the next Trump administration. But I do know what we need to do, Judicial Watch does, and which is to advocate for justice. I want justice. You know, my home was invaded, not literally, but they came knocking at my door, the FBI did, with a subpoena from this corrupt Garland Ray FBI DOJ. FBI agents came to the door of the president of Judicial Watch, and the president of Judicial Watch, the country's biggest government watchdog group, if not the world's most effective government watchdog group. And they retaliated against me and our Judicial Watch for doing our job under the First Amendment. I want justice for that. They hauled me in before a grand jury to harass me for daring to question their abuses of Trump and their attempt to steal the election with impunity. That's a crime as far as I'm concerned. It's an abuse of my civil rights as far as I'm concerned. I want justice. I want justice for Trump. I want justice for the other Americans who've been abused by this Justice Department, the other Americans who've been censored by the regime. I want vindication for the troops who were killed in Afghanistan, no one punished during the Biden surrender. I mean, we could go through list after list. What about the sovereignty issue? What about the border? Let me put it this way. Either we deport them or they become citizens. There's no in between. And if you want the invaders to be here forever and become citizens, then just say no to deportation. But I don't know about you, and I suspect most Americans agree that if you're here legally, you need to go home. And if you're opposing it and trying to undermine it, as far as I'm concerned, you're involved in criminal activity because you're aiding and abetting the unlawful presence of aliens here in the United States. And that law not only applies to citizens, it applies to state governors and the heads of sanctuary cities who aid and abet this dangerous, dangerous menace to the fundamentals of the American system. But believe it or not, I'm happy, right? Because we got lots of opportunities, but we got a lot of work to do. And I kind of describe it I shouldn't say I kind of. My new book, Rights and Freedoms in Peril, yes, our rights and freedoms are in peril, is your guidebook to the Trump administration in terms of the abuses we've had under the Biden regime and what the Trump administration is going to have to do to fix, not only to fix it, but to make sure our country doesn't collapse, our republic doesn't collapse. I encourage you to get it now. It's in bookstores. It's all over, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Rights and Freedoms in Peril. It's a great read. Everyone who reads it, you can go to Amazon, look at the reviews. People love the book. I know it's my book. It's my Judicial Watch book. So I'm a little bit biased, but it's a great book. It's our fourth book. And I always say our latest book is the best book. In this case, our latest book is our best book. The other books are great too. So I want you to buy all the books, but most importantly, the most recent one. So just because there's a new administration, Judicial Watch doesn't stop. And for instance, we haven't stopped monitoring the elections and highlighting the dangers of post-election day counting. You know, I pointed out the election now is, where are we, 10, 12 days out of the election, 13, 14 days. And they're still counting ballots in California. I mean, I've mentioned last week how Arizona was out of control. I think there are probably still some ballots in Arizona that are being counted. And post-election day counting invites voter fraud. It undermines voter confidence, and I would argue is illegal. And we had this big Fifth Circuit ruling that allowing ballots to come in after election day and count them is contrary to federal law. And I would argue just counting them generally for weeks after an election is just so outside the law as to be almost, not up for debate. In California, for instance, they accepted ballots, meaning they could arrive for up to 7 days after election day. So the election didn't technically end until 7 days after the law says it's supposed to end. Just ended this past Tuesday. And they've been counting ballots. Let's put it this way. I could type out and create a ballot, print it, count it, and get more ballots done and handled and processed than the California election officials. Maybe that's exactly what they're doing. Maybe that's why it's so slow. But those are the questions that come up with slow counting. And I went through in detail just how awful it is in California and in this special report earlier this week. Let's run that.
Hey everyone, Tom Fitton with Judicial Watch here. We've been monitoring what's been going on in Arizona, but there are other states where the election processes really are too slow. And one of the big violators is California, where millions of ballots remain uncounted. So we have up here, I'm going to bring my mouse, the results for California, at least as officially presented by the state. Unprocessed ballots status. So obviously you can see here that California has a lot more counties than most other states. The numbers are extraordinary in terms of the estimated total ballots remaining that still haven't been counted and are unlikely to be counted in large measure until at least next week. So let's see here. Let's go down to Los Angeles, obviously a big county. Everyone knows where Los Angeles is. They have, according to the numbers here, let me bring it up, 152,000 ballots remaining to be counted. Supposedly there'll be a next drop later today, presumably 4:30 or 7:30 Eastern time. 35,000 ballots supposedly remain to be cured. Now, cured ballots are ballots that have some type of error or are ineligible because of something happened to it, and a voter can come in and, quote, cure it, but that's a large number as well. But look at these other big numbers here. Merced County, relatively small county, 38,000 ballots still uncounted. Orange County, 173,000 ballots uncounted. Sacramento, the capital, 260,000. Riverside, 165,000. San Bernardino, here we are, 199,000. And it just gets worse and worse. 87,000 in Sonoma County. What's the other big number here? And this is Ventura County, 93,000 ballots, excuse me. So the big number here is 2.626 million ballots uncounted as of now. And there's another interesting stat I want you to see. Vote by mail ballots received after Election Day through E+7 ballots forwarded by other counties. So these are either ballots that, I'm not sure what ballots forwarded by other counties mean, but certainly this covers ballots received after Election Day but are still counted under the California law. Now, you may recall that Judicial Watch just obtained from the Fifth Circuit a ruling that found that counting ballots received after Election Day is an obvious violation of federal law. It doesn't apply to California, but it shows you why elections can be distorted and undermined by the counting of ballots received after Election Day. I would argue counting ballots after Election Day distorts what goes on. 148,000 ballots have been received after Election Day. They've been taking in ballots, and eventually they'll be counted, for 7 days, and it's only ending today, the election technically, as far as I'm concerned. So why is this bad? Because federal law requires generally that we figure out who won on election day. That's the way I read federal law. And it's very unusual to decide elections in post-election day counting. It ought to be unusual, but it's not unusual here in California. And if you if you're following the makeup of the House and whether or not Republicans will control it, or if they do control it, how narrow the victory or majority will be, you'll see a lot of the unknowns are in California, where there are many races where the ballots have yet to be fully counted. And I'm like talking only 60% of the ballots being counted, at least in one race I just saw before we got here. So there's a major issue in California. They're not counting their ballots timely. And what happens is when that happens, it invites voter fraud, undermines voter confidence, and as I've been shouting from the mountaintops, I think it's in plain violation of the law and ought to be ended. And if this election doesn't show why this is a disaster for election integrity in California, 2.6 million ballots not counted a week after the election, unacceptable. By the way, no matter how awful California elections are now, they'd be a lot worse, but for Judicial Watch, we had a massive settlement with Los Angeles County where they removed 1.2 million names from the rolls, cleaned up the rolls of 1.2 million names. We have a lawsuit now that's active to remove millions more, but I know the elections are cleaner in California, but there's a lot more to be done.
My colleagues just checked the latest numbers for me, and they're telling me that they have made virtually no progress. 1.4 million ballots remain uncounted in California. Unacceptable. It shows you that the election system in California is broken and corrupted. To me, it's necessarily corrupt to be counting ballots in this lackadaisical way, with really utter contempt for the confidence voters are supposed to have in a well-run election. It's not a well-run election, even if it's all innocent. You can't presume it's innocent because they're doing the shady counting process. And then up in Pennsylvania, it's being reported these left-wing countings are in the recount ignoring court orders and counting ballots they're not allowed to count. I mean, you've literally have outlaw counting up in Pennsylvania. And you see who has to come in and fight. So Judicial Watch has zero support from this Justice Department in our efforts to uphold the counting law or the election day law that requires ballots be at least counted that only have arrived by election day. And up in Pennsylvania, DOJ is doing jack. The Republicans have to go in and sue every time they get this law breaking going on. So the election's 2 weeks over, and we still have election corruption going on. Now, Judicial Watch is continuing our cases related to the counting of ballots after Election Day, which is, as I say, necessarily problematic. And of course, we got the voter roll cleanups. One of the reasons that the elections were cleaner this year and more honest was because Judicial Watch, through our litigation, our legal efforts, caused the removal of 4 million names. We cleaned up 4 million names from the rolls. 4 million in just the last year or two. But there's millions more to be cleaned up. We've got cases in Illinois, California, and Oregon. We just sued in Oregon. And as the new numbers come in from this election, in terms of the registration data and who voted and such, you know, there's probably going to be a lot more lawsuits and a lot more activity by Judicial Watch to clean up the rolls. It's an ongoing battle. So the more help we have from Congress to better enforce that law and strengthen it, the better. You know, that would be good, right? So, you know, we want the Justice Department to do its job. You know, we want these agencies to do their job. We want Congress to do their job. Obviously, we want the president to do his job. But we don't rely on the system to get things done. We step up to enforce the law and advocate for the rule of law and educate the American people about what the government's up to where we can. And we'll keep on doing that. So as far as I'm concerned, even though the Trump administration, President Trump was a friend, but we still have a lot of work to do. Arguably more work than we had to do the last 4 years because there's so much cleaning up to do. And to that end, we got 2 new lawsuits I want to announce. The first one relates to a topic I already covered, which is DEI in the military. Judicial Watch has been second to none in working through FOIA lawsuits and investigations and exposés to expose the corrupt DEI. Basically, it's just a repackaged version of anti-American Marxism that's being force-fed our cadets and young officers in training. Are they officers in training at the academies, or are they officers when they are in the academy? I don't know. Well, you know my point. The rising military leadership in our military academies are being basically abused through this DEI programming. And now they're on the run, right? Head Steph is coming in, I hope, and he'll clean house in that regard. And they're all nervous about it. And in part because of Judicial Watch pressure, they are kind of running away from it because we're working with a great veterans group, STARS, which is composed of veterans, including very senior folks who are retired from the military, who are apoplectic at what's happening at the academies and in the military generally. And so we filed this lawsuit against the Defense Department because it looks like West Point, I'm trying to pull it up here, forgive me from looking for it here, because West Point, it looks like, tried to disguise a name change, disguise their DEI programming by changing its name. And we sued. We sued West Point for information where it looks like they rebranded the Diversity, Equality, and Inclusion DEI office to the Office of Engagement and Retention. So what was up with that? Did they actually change the mission, or did they change the name? So we asked for documents. It was a straightforward request. We asked back in, when did we ask? August 28th was our FOIA request. And they've been giving us the proverbial hand to the face. I always say it's the hand to the face from the deep state when we ask questions like this. And there was, the FOIA was generated because there was a report detailing the name change. The West Point office, and this is a story from the Armed Forces Press. The West Point Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Equality Opportunity is now called the Office of Engagement and Retention. On the West Point page, there's not much change beyond the title. So changing the title doesn't change the vicious, anti-American, left-wing, racially divisive, abusive Marxism that's being pushed through this DEI collective operation. As I say in our press release, it seems games are afoot at West Point to disguise the radical DEI agenda. And, so there was a story in the Wall Street Journal the other day that they were going to bring back some type of a review board where they were going to look at the generals, certainly the top leadership in the military, who are running the show, who for the last 4 years have been either elevated by Biden or prospered under the Biden regime as they've abused their troops. I mean, let me put it this way. Our morale in the military is falling apart. They're not able to recruit troops because they don't want the people who normally apply to the military to apply because they don't like their politics. So they're making it miserable for those mostly conservative people who are in the military and patriots. They're making it miserable for them. So they're leaving in droves. And they don't want people like, similarly minded people to replace them. So they're making the military inhospitable to the folks who typically join the military. I mean, how many stories have you seen? I don't need to tell you, and many of you are veterans, you know exactly what I'm talking about, where veterans and graduates of the academies are like, their kids and their grandkids are like, well, I don't know if you should go. I don't know if they should go. How terrible that is. I mean, they are alienating our military from the nation it's supposed to defend. That's what the left is doing under the Biden administration. So it's an emergency, Pete. If you get in, you got to shut it down. And he knows it's an emergency. That's why they don't want him there. We had documents, and we've got case after case over the Air Force Academy, the Naval Academy in West Point, detailing this outrageous DEI agenda. And we have it all on our website. And of course, we have a lot of it in my new book, Rights and Freedoms in Peril. So I encourage you to get it. But we're just not going to stop. And Breitbart had a story, I wasn't able to find it before I came on, that the generals are trying to hide their DEI work for fear of being fired. And I hope Pete is smart enough, Pete Hegseth, to know what to do to get around their obstruction. So the other FOIA lawsuit we filed is USAID. USAID is a terrible federal agency, and it's a vehicle for the left to fund basically every anti-American policy, group, agenda, you can name it. Virtually all USAID money being spent, certainly under left-wing administrations, is just designed to destroy America's interests abroad and undermine it. And sometimes it happens even under Republican administrations, let's be clear. And so there were $27 million in grants recently, at least, to, quote, miscellaneous foreign awardees for use in Gaza. Now, I don't need to tell you what that was for. You know what it was for. It was to help the Hamas groups and their allies in Gaza. It wasn't to help the Israelis. It wasn't to help law and order. It wasn't to stop the terrorists. It was to provide aid and comfort to the terrorists. Do I know that for a fact? No. But I have been around the block more than once. I know what goes on typically at USAID. And you want to know another reason I know what they're doing is probably no good for America, and it's probably helping terrorists. They don't want to give us the names of the grantees. So we saw that they were giving all this money away. We asked for details, and we just filed the lawsuit. Let's see what the lawsuit says. All records identifying the recipients of USAID funding under the $7 million grant allocation awarded last year in November. We gave them the identification number, so there's no doubt what the grant is. And then there was a second request, all proposals, applications, and scope of work documents related to any grant award or sub-award associated with that identification number. And that money is now more than 7 million. It's now, as I say, 27 million because it's increased. And as we note in the press release, recently USAID produced records in this case, but is refusing to disclose what organizations received the money. And of course, we're now challenging the withholding of the information. Why is it a state secret where our tax dollars are going abroad? Who are they fooling? You know where it went abroad. On November 15th, the Bureau for, quote, Humanitarian Assistance, a component of the USAID, issued a $7 million grant, which I know is bigger than that now, up to $27 million in value, for multi-sectoral response in Gaza. Multi-sectoral response in Gaza. So that's Hamas Group A, Hamas Group B, and a Hamas Group C. That's the multi-sectoral response I suspect they're awarding. The grant was awarded to miscellaneous foreign awardees. The same day, a continuation grant of $20 million was also issued for that program. So it's $7 million, $27 million in one day. Now you may recall, like this UN group was involved in helping Hamas. I'm wondering what our involvement with that was. Of course, we were supporting them to a certain extent. And as I say in the release, the involvement of employees of a US-backed multinational organization in the October 7th attack on Israel underscores the importance of transparency in who receives US taxpayer dollars and how they are spent. This is critical to protecting the national security of the US and Israel. Hey, Elon, I got something for you to look at. So, Judicial Watch just continues to do the heavy lifting, right? We applaud reformers being brought into government by President Trump. We work with them where and however we can. And on top of that, we'll just continue to do our own work. Find out what the government's up to, expose the corruption. I'm not going to forget about the Biden corruption, are you? I'm not going to forget about the coups, are you? I'm not going to forget about the abuses of Trump, are you? And nor do I think this government. I think there should be prosecutions, investigations, whatever, you name it. There's got to be justice. There's got to be accountability. And it can't be the typical Washington way because it's killing the country. So I encourage you to support Judicial Watch's work. It's even more important than ever, I would argue. And we have a limited time frame where there may be people willing to do the right thing, and we've got to ensure that happens and maximize the right thing. So your support of our work is as important as ever. I encourage you to support us at judicialwatch.org. Join our cause, join our movement, protect our Constitution, protect our nation for ourselves and our posterity. And with that, I wish you the best. God bless you and God bless America. And I'll see you here next time on the Judicial Watch Weekly Update.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.